Hi there. Happy Tuesday. I hope you're doing well. Just settling in after virtual learning this morning, which is what we are still doing around here, but it's going fine. I just always am transitioning from that into getting to chat with you. So here we are. I did want to address a couple things. One is seeing some posts come up around sugar, and I know that's a super hot topic. It always brings a lot of conversation, which is understandable, especially considering how maligned sugar is in our society. So I just want to give you the reminder to definitely grab the free resources that I have to offer. I'll go ahead and link them here afterwards. You remember to do that. I will link them here after, and that will be great if you check those out. You can get them on my website. There's one called My Kid Has a Sweet Tooth. What do I do? And it's simple ways to help your child have a healthy relationship with sugar. And then also sugar scenarios, which talks about all different situations that you might find yourself in and how you can respond and what you can do to handle those situations. Because I think we have to remember, regardless of your health beliefs, and I'm not going to go into that right now about sugar, it exists in our world, and banning our kids from it or completely keeping it out of our homes really is not going to help them learn to live in a world with it, because it's always going to be around, right? At birthday parties, at holidays, at family gatherings, when they're out with their friends, at their friends' houses, all sorts of things. And we're not going to talk all about sugar today, but I could tell you so many stories about kids that haven't had sugar and they're home at all. And then, walking over to the neighbor's house and literally binging, on the neighbor's candy, or I've heard sprinkles, just pouring sprinkles in their mouth, going through wrappers and wrappers of fruit roll-ups, all sorts of things. And so we really don't want to set our kids up to have that kind of relationship with it where they feel out of control around it or like they never get enough. So I just want to give that reminder briefly about sugar, that, we could talk all about the health of it and the different sides of that, but our kids are going to have to be around it at some point, right? We can't protect them from that. So grab my free guides, also scroll through the posts, go through the files. There's lots of information about the overall philosophy of this group. And I just want to be really mindful as the group continues to grow. And I am so grateful for that more and more people are being exposed to different messaging, that we really continue to keep it a safe space where we're not offering any sort of diet or weight loss advice. And that regardless of all of that, that we continue to be kind and thoughtful and respectful as people are learning. So, all right, with that said, let's talk a little bit more about today's topic. I never even made my note about linking to the sugar guides because I just got distracted talking, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about today. Oh, let's see, where do you say I can find the resources? I'm gonna link here in this post, but you can find them. I'm trying to think of where they're linked in our site, but they might be under announcements, but also you can go to NicoleCruzRD.com/resources, and you'll find a variety of free guides there, but both the sugar ones are there. So NicoleCruzRD.com/resources, and you'll get them there, okay? And then I'll put the link in the comments here for this video too once I am done. So, all right. And that definitely, say hello if you're here live with me, and let me know any questions or comments you have, because that's what the point of doing this live is to get to chat with you and really hear what's coming up for you or what questions you have. And if you have topics that you want to do more of, also let me know that, okay? Because today we are going to continue our talk more along the lines of dieting and intuitive eating and the culture that we live in. Because a lot of questions have been coming up about our own relationship with food as adults, not just our kids, which we so often focus on in this group, but also our relationship. So I want to do a few different topics around intuitive eating and us having a healthy relationship with food. And so today I want to talk more about diet culture, food rules, the things that we might not even label as rules, but kind of like that hidden messaging that we have just come to take as beliefs or truths in our own lives, and how those things might be affecting us in our relationship with food, which is important in and of itself, that we have awareness around that. And also, that is absolutely going to inform the way that we feed our children too, which is probably why so many of you ended up in this group. So I think it's really important on the whole spectrum to be able to look at this stuff. So we talk a lot about like diet culture, and I just want to kind of explain a little bit more about what that is. Like, what does that even mean? Because really, we live in this culture, and so we label it as diet culture, but it's everything that we're living in, right? And what that is really the idea that our bodies need to be controlled, and that in order to do that, whether that's for the sake of weight loss and size or health itself, that we do that by following food rules or guidelines. And what that does is we end up labeling foods, or we label the way that we eat, right? And so we end up with these kind of black and white, often, ideas around food and bodies. So really, it's the culture that we live in and the way that we think about and talk about food. Like, it is absolutely normal place. I hear it at my kids' preschool, right? We're not there right now, but at their preschool about, oh, I'm being so bad, or I can't eat that because I'm on this diet. Like, that is diet culture. It's the constant emphasis on food and needing to control it and needing to control our bodies, right? It's a bazillion-dollar industry that is all of these different companies, whether they are outright calling themselves diets or wellness plans, or it's the books, eat this, not that, right? It's all of that. So it's the culture that we live in that tells us that we need to control our bodies, and that the way to do that is by managing our food and activity, essentially, okay? So it basically tells us, like, you can't be trusted to eat in the way that you need, or to know how to eat. And so you need to listen to X, Y, and Z, right? I'll give you a plan. And it might be an exact plan, or it might be that you don't eat these certain foods or these food groups, or you don't eat at this time, right? So it's all the different ways that we are taught that we should or shouldn't eat, in very subtle ways, to outright like follow this exact plan. Okay, so it's all of that. But essentially it says you can't be trusted. You need these parameters in order to either lose weight or be healthy or whatever guise it's under. Okay, so then we end up adopting these rules for ourselves, and we often just take them as truths, right? Like, how often do you just automatically label that certain foods are unhealthy, or they're bad, or these other ones are good? Or somebody just said to me yesterday, even at my kid's little football thing, a good friend said something about like, oh, well, we like to eat early because it's not good to eat late, right? It's like, you know, you're a dietitian, right? I'm like, I don't know. I opt out. I don't want to go into that right now, you know, but it's just these automatic things that it's like, that's just not good for you. You shouldn't do that. But they're so ever present that we take them to just be automatic truths. So it might be ways that you've heard of eating, or certain foods to cut out, that sort of thing. And essentially what it is it's these external rules. We talked about this last week. So if you want to hear more about internal cues and intuitive eating a bit more, I talked about that in the Facebook Live last week. But it's going back to that idea that there's these external rules that we need to follow, as opposed to being able to listen to our own internal cues, such as hunger, fullness, or satiety, right? That we can't trust ourselves to listen to those cues. So we need to know what foods to eat, how many calories to eat, how many points to count, that we shouldn't eat between X, Y, and Z times, right? So it disconnects us from our own cues and says, instead, use these parameters to eat, right? That's diet culture. Those are the food rules. But then what happens is we try to follow them for a period of time, And sometimes people do, and they continue, and they can go down these rabbit holes that become more and more disordered and rigid and stressful, and could end up in what we might even call some sort of diagnosed eating disorder, right? That become very rigid. But what often happens as well is that our own body cues or life itself starts to impede on our ability or desire to continue to follow all of these arbitrary rules, because maybe we're getting hungry, or we're craving different foods, or if we're completely eliminating food groups, we start craving that nutrient, right, that we're eliminating. So then we often end up going off of the plan, and then we feel guilt and shame, and we feel bad about ourselves. We feel out of control around food. We feel stressed about it because we feel like we're not doing it right, or we should be doing it better. Or maybe we're stressed even while we're doing it because we're trying to follow it so well. Maybe we're feeding our families different. Maybe we feel like we can't go out for, appetizers with our friends because we feel bad and like we shouldn't be eating that food. Right. So, but at some point, those cues start to kick in and we want to do that, or we don't want to live so rigidly anymore. And that's both from a mental and emotional place and from a physical place of your body wanting variety, of your body wanting the nutrients that you're not having. So what often happens then is the pendulum like swings the other way, right? So any sort of plan or rule puts your brain into a restrictive mindset, because it's like, I'm not allowed to eat these certain foods. I shouldn't eat them. They're bad. So we have some sort of restriction, and then we end up swinging the other way, right? Because we feel like we really do want those foods. So what often happens is we end up feeling out of control around food, eating more of those foods that we restricted. We beat ourselves up. We go back into that restriction feeling like, I just proved I am out of control with food. I really can't trust myself. So then we put ourselves back on some sort of plan or cut something out and say, I shouldn't be doing this. And then we continue in this cycle. See it like the pendulum swinging back and forth, or like a cycle of, okay, I got here, now I have to put myself back here and then back here, right? And we keep going through it. But really, it's because we're so disconnected from ourselves in allowing ourselves to listen to what type of foods we really want to eat. So again, this often leads to that out of control feeling with food, as well as weight cycling, plus the guilt, shame, and stress that all comes with it. Okay. So if you can see that this culture that we live in, that's all about having these rules and expectations for the way we should eat, isn't helpful, right? It doesn't provide any sort of long-term stability with food. That's why we know that 95% plus of the people that lose weight regain it and regain back even more, because this doesn't work. We don't have research that shows there is any effective way to lose weight for the long term. Yes, for the short term. Yes, you can do these plans for the short term. And yes, you have the random friend that has done it. Absolutely. You have the random friend that has lost weight for an extensive period of time. And there could be a multitude of reasons for that. But for 95+% of people, that doesn't work. And that's what we have to remember. Okay. So if this isn't helpful, well, what do we do? And that's where that intuitive eating piece comes back into play, where we can start listening to our own body cues again. But in order to be able to do that, we have to get rid of all of these diet rules and ideas that we have. Otherwise, they are going to go ahead and inform the decisions that we're making about food. Because otherwise we can have a craving, like, I want to have a hamburger, but instead we come up with, well, you shouldn't have the bun because that's too many carbohydrates, or don't get an actual burger, you should really get the salad, or no, that's not good, get the turkey sandwich. Like, you could come up with all sorts of things that you should get instead of the burger that you really want, right? So, and the burger might not be your thing. This is just an example, but whatever it is. So we tell ourselves, don't get that, get this other thing. And then we end up feeling often, not every time, but often dissatisfied, because what we really wanted was the burger. Or maybe we're hungry because it wasn't the salad that we wanted, and that ended up being too light. And so then we're left hungry, right? Maybe we're frustrated because we didn't choose what we really wanted, or we're not satiated. So then we go home and we eat the chips in the cupboard because what we really wanted was the grains or the carbohydrates. Okay, so that's how it ends up playing out. And sometimes, yeah, it works for a period of time, but over the longer period, we don't want to keep up with that. Our bodies don't want us to do that. They don't want us to deny them of what our cravings are and what our body really wants in terms of nutrients. Okay, so what happens is we tell ourselves, nope, I shouldn't have it because of X, Y, and Z. We don't get it. We end up dissatisfied and we go through that whole cycle. So what we have to start doing is really challenging ourselves to let go of what those rules are. And we need to look at, like, where did I learn that carbohydrates, these are just examples, might not be your thing, but that carbohydrates are automatically bad, that I should only have X number of calories a day, that I need to count my macros, right? That I shouldn't eat past 7 p.m. or that I should skip breakfast, or that I have to eat breakfast every day. Like, it could be any sort of rule that you have. So I want you to start thinking about, how do I label foods? Do I think good or bad? Do I think healthy, unhealthy? Do I eat based on a certain time of day? Do I have a lot of shoulds? Do I eliminate certain categories of foods or food groups? Do I have trouble bringing certain foods into the house? Do I follow portion sizes or measure my food? Like, what are the reasons that you choose to eat or not eat? Or do you say, I'm good during the week, but Sunday is cheat day, or Friday night is a cheat night, or I'm going to be good all week so then I can splurge on the weekend? What are the ways that you think about food and the things you tell yourself? So if any of these things resonate, I want you to write them down, and I want you to start making a list of what comes up for you in terms of your own thinking, or maybe you see it in your children because you notice something that brings up something in you, okay? And you think they shouldn't eat that, or they shouldn't eat like that, or that's too much. So we have to start looking at first, what are our rules? What are they? Because some of them are blatant, right? Like, I should only eat this number of calories a day, or gluten's bad, or like whatever that is. Some of them are blatant, and some of them we don't even realize. They're more subtle. Like I was saying, just like, I shouldn't have that much. Or maybe we think like, oh, I already had bread today. I really shouldn't have a sandwich for lunch because I had bread this morning. Like, those are ideas and rules about food. And so then where does that come from? That you should only eat one piece of bread in a day, or 2 pieces of bread, or you shouldn't have it at every meal, or whatever that got implanted as a rule. That came from somewhere, from diet culture in some form, from some diet, from a friend, from a parent, whatever it was, okay? That came in, but it doesn't have to be your truth. And it likely isn't serving you very well. Okay, but it's normal because that's just the culture we live in. That's the whole point. These things are going to feel like they're just normal because we hear them everywhere, everywhere. Okay, it's in all the books, all the magazines, all the TV shows. The random person at the grocery store who's like told me, oh, don't get that pasta sauce, it has too much sugar. I'm like, I'm just trying to pick out a pasta sauce. I wasn't even talking to you, but giving us like general advice. That's happened more than once to me. I don't know about you. Standing and looking at products and someone has just like inserted their advice about what I should or shouldn't buy. No one asked, right? But it's normal. It's normal to be standing in the line at the grocery store and the person behind you to start talking about how bad they're being, or they really shouldn't be buying this. Okay. That is what I'm talking about diet culture, about the culture we live in. So you have to start recognizing these beliefs that you have adopted and then start challenging them. So one thing is like to really start noticing what feelings come up for you around different foods. Like I was saying, the way your child's eating, whatever it is. So start noticing like what feelings are coming up. And if you're noticing a reaction to something, that likely is because there's some sort of idea or rule around it. Okay. And then what we want to do is work to create food neutrality. I talked about food neutrality a lot in this group in terms of trying to create it for our children. but we have to create it for ourselves too. That we're not good because we choose the salad and bad because we choose the burger. Okay, that we also, just like our kids, are allowed to choose the foods that we want to eat, that sound good to us, that are going to make us feel good. Okay, there aren't rules about that. And that's that neutrality. You're not good nor bad. You're not cheating. You're not off the plan, right? You can just choose what to eat. So some of these things might be really hard to challenge because they're so ingrained. So part of it is just recognizing that, like, okay, yeah, these things I truly believe, or I've been practicing for so long that they feel like they're just part of my belief system now. So one is going to be to recognize that whatever you think about them, they're probably just not helpful. So that's the first place to start. Like, this seems so hard to challenge because I believe it. And I can still recognize, though, that it's not really helpful for me to continue believing because of all the things that we laid out from before, right? The guilt, the shame, the pendulum swinging, the weight cycling, all the things, okay? So one is to realize, like, it's just not helpful to even think that way. It doesn't set you up to have a healthy relationship with food, to be able to listen to your internal cues. In fact, it completely does the opposite and takes you away from that, okay? Another thing is to notice that all foods serve a different purpose. So you don't have to think, it's not accurate to believe that carrots and candy have the same nutrients, right? But we can still recognize that different foods have different purposes. And that could be based on the food qualities themselves, like it's something that's cold and creamy, or it's crunchy, or it's salty. So when I want a food like that, that's going to be the right type of food to have. It could also be that certain foods bring us joy because we have memories of them from grandparents or our parents in our childhood. I remember running after the ice cream man, and now my kids get to do that, and that's so fun, right? So it's also recognizing that there's different purposes with food. That when I get to bake cookies with my sister and my mom and all of our kids together on Christmas, that is a memory that brings us so much joy, right? That foods serve different purposes. And that's true with nutrients as well, right? Like if my blood sugar is dropping and I need something quick, I don't need some kale. I just don't. That's not going to help me. That's not going to help me get my concentration back. That's not going to give me much energy. That's not going to make me feel better. What I do need is something that's going to give me quick energy, whether that's a piece of fruit or some juice or some soda, whatever it is, right? It could be anything like that. It could be whatever's available, okay? So we have to recognize that a piece of candy might be the best situation or the best food for that situation. Whereas at another time, if I'm not super hungry or I'm craving vegetables, right? Or I want to add certain texture to a meal, that those veggies might be a great choice. But that foods can serve a different purpose. They're not just black and white. This is healthy, this is unhealthy, this is good, this is bad. Okay, so we have to recognize having food rules is not helpful, and that all foods can serve a different purpose, whether that's emotionally or whether physically. Okay. I think also just recognizing, like, I don't know how to do this yet, but it could be different. Like I've heard for so long that I need to eat a certain way, and I'm just trying to find that right diet, right? Like if only I could find the right one and stick to it, then it would be better. But maybe there's another way, right? Maybe that is being able to listen to your own body and those cues internally. Okay, you've just been disconnected from them, but it doesn't mean that it's not still there. So just opening yourself up to the idea that maybe the solution is not another plan or diet. It's not finding that perfect thing. It's actually getting back in touch with yourself. The cues that you were born with, you just got distracted from. And again, I talk about that more in last week's video, okay? Then challenge yourself. So challenge those thoughts. How I said, start making that list of things. Start challenging. What is another thought that I could think instead of carbs are bad? I shouldn't eat carbs. What about like carbs are our brain's primary source of energy. They're going to help my concentration and make me think better. There's a challenging thought, right? Or maybe it's, I notice that when I go without carbs, I don't feel that well. My body is telling me that it needs carbohydrates because I crave them when I don't have them. So how can you start challenging those thoughts? Instead of blaming it on yourself, I just have no willpower, I need to find the right plan. How can you start to challenge those thoughts and really listen to what your body's telling you? Okay. And then challenge yourself to break those rules. When you find yourself saying, no, don't get the burger, you really should have gotten the salad, that's what you need. Challenge yourself to get the burger anyways and say, that's what I'm really craving. That's what my body wants right now. And I'm not good nor bad for it, right? That's what I want. Okay, so challenge yourself to start breaking those rules so that you can see that you can do it and you can see what happens. And it's not a quick fix. It's not like, oh, I just do this and I suddenly feel better, because you're going to probably have a lot of those rules and ideas continue to come up. Okay, so you have to work through that process. And I highly recommend, I actually have the intuitive eating workbook right here. I do highly recommend this because it's going to walk you through like step by step. They just came out with a new edition of the book itself, Intuitive Eating, the 4th edition of the book, but this is the workbook. And so it has like exercises that you can actually do in it, right? Like actual exercises that you can do. So the Intuitive Eating Workbook by Evelyn Tribbley and Elise Resch can be a great resource as well. Okay, to actually start working through these steps and feeling like maybe you have a plan and some sort of support with it. And that's what can be really hard, is that if we're so used to dieting and plans, it can feel like, like intuitive eating and listening to my body is so all over the place because it doesn't feel like a plan. It feels like, what am I doing? What am I doing now? I'm just like, it's a free for all. It feels crazy. So sometimes having like the workbook can feel like, okay, I'm actually working on this thing, which is like listening to my body, or it's challenging myself to eat the foods that I really want, right? Or maybe I'm working through challenging those food beliefs that I have. So it can feel more like I'm doing something when it feels kind of scary and uncomfortable to let go, okay? Let me know if you have questions about all of that. I want to see, I have another comment over here. Okay, so you said, but that's hard when you as the parent are the one who decide when and what to offer, when, where, and what to offer. So I talk about this a lot, actually. I know I did this on a Facebook Live a couple of weeks ago, or so, maybe it's been a little longer now. What I'm talking about today is intuitive eating, which is different than the division of responsibility, although they are both based on the same thing, which is like raising intuitive eaters that are able to listen to their body. And I get why that feels a little bit confusing, but the division of responsibility is the what, when, and where of food. But within that framework, we are allowing our child to still listen to their body and choose what food they want and the amount. And we're not saying like, no, this food is bad. We're not setting up food rules when we do that. We're doing the opposite. We're just like, here's what's available, right? Even as an adult, I don't always have the exact food that I want, so they are a little bit different, but they are still going towards the same ultimate goal. And like I said, I'll try to find that and link that too, because I talked a lot more about that in one of the recent videos, and I know why it is confusing, but I'm not going to go into all that right now, but I will link that. Okay. I also got another question here that I got that was, how do we help children in larger bodies and teach them about understanding their food cues and becoming more aware of portions, etc.? And do you recommend any books? So I'm going to continue through this series of talking more about intuitive eating and everything to talk a bit more about weight and health as well. So I'm not going to dive deep into that today. What I do want to just like put out there though is our job as parents is not to necessarily teach them about their food cues, but it's to allow them to listen to them. Now, if they've gotten off track because we have been dictating portions or telling them they have to eat something or aren't allowed to eat something or whatever, and they've gotten distracted from those internal cues, the best thing that we can do is actually follow the division of responsibility, present food neutrally, and then allow our child to listen to those cues. If you have a teenager, there is like an intuitive eating workbook for teens. And so if we're at that age, we can start actually teaching them a bit more to get back in touch with those cues. But otherwise, teaching them about portion sizes is exactly what I was just describing as being part of diet culture. So that's what we don't want to do, because that teaches them rules about eating things external to their own body that they want to listen to. Okay, so if you're looking for books, I don't recommend any books to actually teach children this. I recommend getting them, involved in cooking in the kitchen, helping garden, playing with food, allowing them to explore food. Okay, but for parents, you might check out Ellen Satter's book, Your Child's Weight Helping Without Harming. I do caution that it's a bit fat phobic in a lot of ways, but it also has good information in terms of how to actually handle it in a structured way that still allows your child to listen to their bodies. And it goes by the stages. Okay. All right. I hope that helps for today. Like I said, I will provide you with those links and resources that I mentioned. Please let me know if you have any questions about diet culture, food rules and guidelines, how to start challenging those and get back to eating more intuitively. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.